as I'll say very often in all the talks, do your best to disregard all the concepts you might form when listening to me. My voice, my accent, how fast or slow I'm talking, who I might be, what my name might be, what my history might be. It's very easy when we listen to someone speak, when we watch someone speak, and I may get in front of the camera at some point, but it's very easy to form concepts and interpretations and all kinds of different ideas about the medium through which this kind of a message or talk is happening. And so I want to emphasize as many times as I can, especially for new people who might start listening, this is not coming from an individual. From the worldly perspective, from the perspective of our mundane experience and perception, you may perceive a person talking to you, a separate individual, an individual with an opinion or a perspective. This is not that. So as best you can, disregard the speaker. Just let it flow through the person who's speaking, and let the actual power of the message or transmission come to you without the filter of the medium through which it's coming through. So having said that, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that's heard often in probably every spiritual and religious tradition, and that is, if you have a spiritual realization, an insight, an experience of oneness, or some kind of a breakthrough, people will often say that they've lost it. In other words, they have a glimpse, almost like peeking behind the curtain and seeing what's really going on. And although that might cause someone to have different kinds of experiences, whether it be peaceful, blissful, feeling like they've dropped the individual self and feeling as if they're one. And again, sometimes this can come from meditation. It can come from some kind of trigger in one's life, maybe a breakup or losing a job or something that shakes you to the core. It can also come from people doing drugs, LSD, mushrooms, something like that. And they think that they get a glimpse and have a realization and that things have changed. And for a time, they do change. And there might be some lasting changes, some lasting insights. But in almost every case that I've seen and heard, at some point, they say they lose it. Whether that means they've left the place where they had this realization and they've gone back to quote unquote normal life, everyday life, whether they have something wonderful happen to them and it brings their daily life back into their consciousness, and so everything is going well, and they lose the insight to see beyond those things because they're going so well, the mundane takes over and you forget what you saw when something shocked you out of that existence. And people insist that they can lose it and it goes away. This is both true and not true. So I'll use the dream analogy again. So within the framework of an individual living in the world in an almost dreamlike state, you can lose that glimpse, that different perspective of seeing reality not as an individual, but more as a oneness, and that you feel part of that oneness. And therein lies the issue. That is still a state. It's still something objective that you've experienced and that you're trying to grasp onto. And that's why you feel like you lose it, because anything that you get, that you have grasped, that you have objectified, and you've identified as an experience is just another part of the dream. Now, it might be something that is a kind of launching pad for you to continue your spiritual seeking until you don't need to seek anymore. So within the dream, this might be something that pushes you forward, something that you needed to see, needed to feel in order to continue. But if we're talking about the nature of the absolute self, the absolute truth, the realization is only another kind of manipulation or interpretation of that ultimate truth. It's not the truth. It's not your actual self. It's not enlightenment. Anything that can be formed as a concept and objectified is not, quote unquote, it. And that's why you feel like you lose it. What you will eventually come to see is that, I'll use the word ego, but you can use the small I, the individual I, but I'll use the word ego here. The ego will manipulate spiritual seeking to continue its own existence. I'll repeat that again. The ego will manipulate and hijack spiritual seeking to perpetuate its own existence. So what winds up happening is that any experience, no matter how profound, no matter how real it might seem in terms of, I really get it now, I see it, I've woken up, I'm enlightened, all these things, the ego is causing you to grasp these things as a concept to simply perpetuate its own existence, even as an enlightened person. So let's say you have this experience and you feel, okay, I really got it. I feel enlightened now. Now the ego goes on living in existence as an enlightened being. But it's still the ego. It's still part of the dream. Because there's a separate entity objectifying an experience or a state of being that is just part of the dream still. Again, if you want to liken it to quantum physics, there is no way for a physicist, scientist, individual to separate themselves from the reality they're trying to examine. And therefore, everything that you examine has your fingerprint on it. Without question, every time. There is no way to objectively observe your life, your surroundings, your condition. Ask yourself why you came to this talk, why you're listening to this talk. Do you think the ego would consent to listening to a talk that can result in its own demise, its own death? Or is grace carrying you to this place? The grace of the Guru, the grace of God, the grace of the self. Would the ego lead you to something that would result in the extinguishment of the ego itself? So understand that when you have a realization, it's not that it's not real, it's not that it's not important, because it can be very important. It can be the start of seeing through the veil that covers the truth. But as long as there is an observer, an experiencer, that is not, quote unquote, it. What you will see eventually, at some point, is that instead of actually waking up, realizing, being, you're just wanting to know. You're wanting to know enlightenment, know realization. You want to know you're the Parabrahman rather than just a individual who's suffering in a world with no power and just at the mercy of everything. This is a very subtle point. It might sound obvious when you say it, but when you experience it, it is very subtle. The ego will do everything in its power to perpetuate itself. And again, I'm using the word ego. That actually doesn't exist. It's a fabrication. But until you see through the fabrication, it functions because you give it the power to function. And who do I mean by you? It has nothing to do with your individual identity. It has nothing to do with my individual identity. That is not who we are. And there's nothing to feel, there's no reason to feel shameful or inadequate or not worthy compared to someone else, what their experience is, what their status is. When you have a realization, when you have an awakening, and your ego objectifies it, and it becomes an experience and a state, and your mind turns it into knowledge, all that means is that you're not ready to actually give up the idea of the seeker, your ego, your individuality. Many people say that they're seeking and they really want freedom and they really want truth. And when the moment comes, they're simply not ready for it. It's not about fault. It's not about good or bad or judgment or anything like that. Drop all those ideas. It has nothing to do with it. You will seek until you're ready to not seek. You will go to a religion or a philosophy or a guru or a yogi or whatever it might be until you are done with those things, until you've extinguished the need to seek. And we've talked about in previous talks about moments before death, similar moments in everyday life that are like death, where it shocks you to your core. You can't do anything to attain enlightenment or realization. You can't know it. You can't experience it. But the good news is that when you realize all that, everything will fall into place. When you realize that your entire life, your entire existence has been always taking care of itself. You might cry with tears of joy, you might laugh, you might do both. But even that's not it. It cannot be explained. The end game, so to speak, the final part of all this can't be explained. It can't be described. What I'm describing to you are some of the pitfalls, some of the illusions that our mind and our ego play games with us as we seek and we profess so profoundly to want freedom, to not suffer. And you might ask if all these things are true and concepts are useless and the ultimate truth is beyond that, why am I speaking? Because even if suffering is an illusion, compassion for the one who thinks that they're suffering compels some people, whether you call it grace that's causing me to speak or whatever word you use. Even if someone is suffering because of something we see as unreal, perhaps you see someone who's afraid of spiders. You're not afraid of spiders, but they are. And they're suffering. If you can take this spider away, even though you know that there's no need for them to be so afraid and so affected by the spider, if you can take that spider away, you do, out of compassion. Not because it's affirming their fear. Not because you're saying you should have a phobia. But because you understand that simply taking away the source of that phobia is much easier than trying to logically explain to someone why they should not have a phobia. So although I see why you don't need to be afraid, why you don't need to punish yourself and struggle for enlightenment and realization Well, I clearly see those things. Well, I see that your suffering actually doesn't have to happen at all. Far from being an aloof disregard for others' suffering, I'm compelled to talk about these things, to help those who think they're trapped and they're not free to see that they already are. So when you talk about or you hear others talking about losing their realization, losing their touch with truth, understand that that is not true, even though that they feel it's true. The only thing they lost was another creation, another objectification of something, another state of being. And these are coming and going all the time. And you'll have to keep going through this cycle of seeing something, grasping it, losing it, trying to find it again, until you realize all that is actually keeping you further trapped. It's perpetuating the dream. It's continuing exactly what you think you need to get out of by seeking and trying to know. You have to let go of even knowing, even seeking. You can only be truth. You are the Parabrahman. You are the ultimate self. It's not something to know. It's not something to realize. That's all a game. And while that might be frightening at first, it's the ultimate freedom when you are it, when you don't need to know it. There's nothing you need to do to perpetuate your own being. There's nothing you need to do to understand, to perpetuate an idea, to retain knowledge. It's absolute peace and freedom. So I'll leave it there. If you have any questions, please leave those in the comments. I can't always say that I will answer all the comments or meet you where you are unless I feel like it's for your benefit. But please feel free to post them. Maybe someone else will answer. And I will keep making videos as I'm compelled to do. I have no plan. I have no schedule for videos. Whenever Grace says make a video, I just make a video and express. So I will talk to you soon.